Good evening, everybody. My name is Ferry. I will be your host for this evening. Welcome back to the ISACA Square Table presented by Noria and ISACA Netherlands chapter. Today, we will talk about COBIT's value for small and medium enterprises. But before we start, as always, a couple of house rules. Please make sure that you mute your microphone and then stop sharing your video. Let us give the whole attention to our speaker. And then if you log in with a different name than the name that you registered, please make sure that you change it to make sure that we can send the right CP certificate afterwards. And soon you will see a sign that this presentation will be recorded. And then if you have any questions, we will moderate whether to use a virtual raising hand or type a chat box. So today we will kind of do some interaction in the middle of the presentation. So don't hesitate to put your questions in the chat box during the presentation. So today we have a great speaker, Gret Volders from Belgium. So basically, she has been working or founded her own company actually since 1995, focusing on small and medium enterprises. She's also the author of the latest guidance on a COBIT for SMEs. So it will be a lovely evening today that we hear directly from the author. So Gret, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I will put the presentation on the screen. So here is the presentation. So I will talk today about the newest COBIT guide for small and medium enterprises. Before starting, I will just give a little bit more introduction of myself. I've been active in ISACA for many years. I've been helping in different working groups for the evaluation or the development of different COBIT versions of COBIT. I provide training, COBIT trainings until the last version because, just a matter of administrative things. Vocals is just a short introduction. Is a consulting company. We provide advice regarding to the wide area of IT governance since 25 years, well, more even. And it's not only for SMEs, but also for large organizations. But we work for SMEs, and as I will explain during the presentation, SME, small and medium enterprises, is a very relative term. So I will explain also to you what it means and what the definition is of an SME. So just if you have any questions, like Ferry told you, you can send them during the chat, or afterwards you can contact me on my email address. That's no problem. What I will do to, I'm just struggling with the sequence. The agenda for today is that I will give you an introduction to this new guide. Not only the guide, but also starting your own governance initiative, which is a challenge in a lot of enterprises or a lot of programs. It is a challenge to get that right, to get the scope right. Then I will go into detail for the governance and management objectives, which you might know or might not know from the core publication of COBIT. And I will focus there on what is different in this SME guide. And then as a last point, there are some simple tools you can use to scope first, to define if your organization could be considered as an SME, and also to scope your governance program. So that's the agenda for today. I will watch the time, but to keep it within 1 hour. So regarding this enterprise governance for of information and technology for small and medium enterprises, I will give a short introduction, the positioning of this guide in the COBIT product architecture, and then also just for those who wouldn't know the evolution of COBIT over the years, which has led to this publication. First thing to consider is whether your company can apply this guide or not. Well, it's not a mathematical discussion or test you should do. It's more like how complex is your organization, what do you do, how are the how is the command structure in your organization, how complex is the IT infrastructure, and so on. So the criteria put here are things you can consider to see or to decide whether this guide may apply to your company or not. Also, before going further into details, I have to tell you that it's not like if you are in a multinational big organization that you cannot look at this guide, because the purpose of this guide is to make the core COBIT guides a little bit less complex. So if you start using COBIT, you could also have a look at this guide to get some more guidance on how to apply COBIT in general. The official definition of an SME is between 50 and 250 FTEs and a turnover of a certain below a certain amount, but this is the official definition, and we think that some more aspects can be considered, and that's why I will explain to you the suitability test, which is something very old, let's say. I don't know if some of you have heard about the COBIT Quick Start, which has been developed, I think, more than 10 years ago, and I was also part of that working group. And for that Quick Start, we already developed this suitability test, and we thought it would be useful to reactivate it or to put it back into the picture. So I will explain that to you later on in this presentation. So we have here a first polling question regarding your participation. Is it because you are part of an SME, or you want to learn about COBIT in general, or you want to learn about the differences between this publication and the core publication? I don't know if you can see these questions now, because I don't see it because I'm presenting.
Yes, we can see, and then I can see that the polling are coming in.
Okay. So let me know what the result is, maybe, or because I cannot see it.
All right, will do. Still coming in.
Okay, good.
But
Thank you.
so far, from what I can see, more than 60% of our participants today choose that they want to learn more about COBIT in general.
Mm-hmm.
And then around 30% on the differences with the core publication.
Mm-hmm.
And then the smallest percentage on the part of SME.
Okay.
So
Good.
number 2, number 3, and then number 1.
Yeah. Okay. Good, because I also have foreseen something about general in COBIT and not only the differences. So that's good then. Let's go on with my presentation. So this is the first part, is introducing to you enterprise governance of information and technology. And this AGIT, as it is called, or it's the abbreviation, it's well chosen by ISACA to name it like that. It's enterprise governance and not like IT governance, what I also use a lot, because it's the enterprises is the responsible or accountable for the governance of information and technology. And it's called now, in this latest version, information and technology, because it's not about IT as the IT department, but it's information and how technology supports that, the management of information. So that's why it is called enterprise governance of information and technology, and not just IT governance, as well, I suppose we all use that term because it's easier than to name it AGIT or the full name. So it should be part of your corporate governance, exercised by the board or the highest level of decision takers or in your organization. And it is about yeah, organizational processes, structures, and mechanisms, and it is also meant both for business and IT professionals. So it's not only oriented to IT professionals or your IT department, if you want to name it like that, but certainly also the business has an important role in this governance of information and technology. And what it is about creating value in the end, creating value for your organization. And how do you do that from the information and technology part? By aligning your IT to the business. So that's an important aspect of governance, is to align IT with the business. And that is then based on the enterprise governance of IT. This is high level what that enterprise governance of information and technology is about, and how ISACA considers this. So information and technology is crucial in the support, sustainability and growth of enterprises. And these days, I can hardly imagine that there is an organization which thinks that information and technology is not important or not critical and strategically important. So that is something that has changed a lot over the years. And that also means that top management needs to be involved more and more, and not only the IT manager should be involved. So that's also why in COBIT um, we link IT goals to enterprise goals, and it's the purpose to achieve enterprise objectives. Also, it's about resilience to learn and adapt, but also IT risks is important aspect in the whole concept of COBIT. This SME guide is probably you know these four main uh, products, as Isaka calls it. It's the framework which gives an introduction and methodology, governance and management objectives, which is the main part concerning content that is provided to set up your own governance and management program. Then there is a design guide, which I will explain a little bit here, and also the implementation guide is a separate guide that helps you to set up your own implementation program. The purpose of this guide is that it's mainly based on the governance and management objectives, but the aim of this guide was to have one guide that explains it all, so that you don't have to go first to this guide and then to the design guide, to the implementation guide. So we aimed at developing one guide. If you read through it or you start using it in your own organization, that you have all information available, all knowledge is available in this SME guide. This is a complete overview of all COBIT products and the product architecture. It looks very complicated, I know. The core is here, this the model for the governance and management objectives, 40 objectives, which are closely related to 40 processes. But there is more than that. There is also um, enterprise strategy goals and so on. And here you see the term focus area, and the SME guide is one of the focus areas that ISACA developed. There are other ones for security, risk, and DevOps, and those focus areas have another kind of setup, meaning that they are focusing on security or on risk or on DevOps, and they are an addition to the other publications. So that means that for the core publication for governance management and objectives, you will this one for security risk or DevOps will only mention what is relevant for security risk or DevOps. In the SME guide, we have chosen to keep the 40 objectives and not to make a selection there, but to keep it all, but to give specific guidance for SMEs. Here is the history of COBIT, how it has evolved from being an audit framework to a control framework, management, IT governance, governance of enterprise IT, as it was called in COBIT 5. And you see here that there were two other guides, separate guides, Vel IT, Risk IT, that all has been integrated in the COBIT 5. So then there was only one guide. And now we have the COBIT 2019, for which the name changed again to Enterprise Governance of Information and Technology, and it is this last version on which the SME guide is also based on. Why I show this is because the evolution is important. That at this moment, with this aged, um, the the time was okay to develop this guide, this COVID guide for SMEs. As you might know, is that in an SME you don't have a separate audit department. So it is all should be integrated, and in this it's focusing on management, but not only management, also the governance is important. So at this moment, it was a good moment, Isaac thought, to develop this SME guide. Here I have another polling question about your familiarity or knowledge about the core publication. So the question is, I don't know anything about COBIT, or that's the answer, or you know about COBIT but never worked with it, or you have experience, knowledge and experience with COBIT 2019.
Yeah, so the polling is still coming in, and the number
Okay,
growing and growing and growing.
good.
So far, I think the biggest portion of our participant tonight is on the second option, that they know about COVID 2019 but actually never worked with it.
Mm-hmm,
And then the second one is number three, that they know about 2019
mm-hmm.
version and have worked with it. And then the least one is that I don't know anything about COVID.
Luckily, that your audience knows something about COVID. Good, good. Okay, thank you for answering. Oops. So now a little bit more details on COBIT itself in general, so not specifically for this SME guide. COBIT is a framework for governance and management of enterprise information and technology, and the distinction between governance and management has been made clear in the previous version already of COBIT, but has been improved further in this version. So that's important, that it's not only management but also governance. And COBIT defines those seven components which you see here in the balls around the governance system. And then you see that processes is only one of the seven components, which means that processes are important, of course, but you also need to take into consideration organizational structures, and organizational structures are functions, committees, is any organizational object, I would say, or structure as we call it, that can take and facilitate decisions in your organization. I will give you the list of organizational structures we have defined for the SMEs, and then you will see that more clear. There are principles, policies, and procedures which are the basis, or the are leading how to develop your processes. There is information, culture and ethics and behavior is important to consider. but also the people, skills, and the competencies. And then, as the last one, but not the least important, of course, services, infrastructure, and applications. So, if you develop your governance system, this means that you are working on processes. We all do, and it's what we do a lot, but taking into consideration the other six uh, components helps to build a good and solid governance system. Another aspect which is new in the COBIT 2019 are the design factors. They are mentioned in the introduction guide, but there is a complete guide dedicated to design your governance program or initiative. And here you see the different areas that you need to consider to define the importance of the COBIT objectives in your or for your organization. I will show you the outcome. What we did, we developed that we filled in the design toolkit which exists now for this. Well, now it's already a few years, of course, that COBIT 2019 exists. But I will show you how this works for using the design factors. Then, still the very important part is the core model of all the objectives. Here you see on top the EDM objectives for evaluating, directing, and monitoring, and these are the governance objectives. And then you have here four domains with specific objectives. It's not the purpose that I go into detail of all these, of course, because it would take too much time. But what we did is well, we are trying always to have a good method to scope your governance initiatives. And what we did is we asked the advisors, there is a group of governance advisors at ISACA, COBIT governance advisors, and they filled in a survey of by prioritizing those 40 objectives. And this is the outcome of it, where you see that these four were considered as the most important for an SME. And then, so you see, very important are those blue ones. And then the gray ones are just in the middle. And then we go to the little relevance, and this is more the green, well, green like color, and the full green, dark green is the least important. You can use this as a starting point, as a predefined list of priorities. And I know that some of you or all of you will have questions about this, will have comments to give, like, why is quality not important? I just pick out one of these objectives. And that's why you can use this as a starting point, but better is to make your own priority, of course. So if you want to start your own in governance initiative, um, like I said, you can use this as your first priority, but important is that any governance system is not the same for any organization. So you have to adapt it, you have to adopt it to your own organization with its specific character and profile. There are critical aspects, aspects like the size, your sector, regulatory landscape, and so on, which will make one or another objective more important. And that's why I think you always should go through the design toolkit to prioritize the objectives. This is how it works, the design workflow. And it is, you see here, four steps in this design workflow. And this is out of the design guide, of course, but we took it also in this SME guide. So it is important to understand, as a first step, your strategy, goals, the risk profile, and also current IT related issues. So, issues which you have with INT. Understanding is the first step to think about it, and then you can fill in the first part of the tool to indicate what kind of strategy. There is a goals cascade because it's relating to the enterprise goals, risk profile, and then the issues you will fill in what is applicable for your organization. Then you get a first score, let's say, of the 40 objectives, and then you refine this by uh, considering 7 other aspects of your organization, like the role of IT, your sourcing model, threat landscape, and so on. Compliance requirements, very important. And then the last step is important because out of these 2 steps, you get a scoring of the 40 objectives, but then you have to evaluate that, you have to check it with the reality of your organization to avoid that there are very strange outcomes. And I give you an example after this here after this slide. So what I want to say is that it the outcome of the workflow of the tool that you have filled in will generate recommendations, but you have to consider it in the context of your organization. To start your own initiative, there are 2 useful supports in this guide. It's a chapter 8, which we developed with a practical example of using this publication, and also applying the design factors, which is in detail explained in Appendix C of this publication. To show you how it works, I well, we filled in the design toolkit for SMEs, and the outcome was this one here. So here you see for the 40 objectives what the outcome is of each objective. You see some red ones, and that means that they are the least important. And you see here like APO3 is enterprise architecture is the most important ones. So if you see this, you have to consider it, of course, because I go to the next slide because you probably and don't know all these numbers by heart. So here you see that for APO, you get enterprise architecture, which a rate of 100, innovation 95, and human resources is next with 75. So these are very high scores. For BAI, build, acquire, and implement, it's about building and identification. And building is important, but also change, acceptance, and transitioning, and changes itself. So this is what you should consider. And then TSS domain, then we are here. It's about operations, problems, and then the third one is service requests and incidents. And from the MEA is it the first one, manage performance and conformance. If you see this, you can understand, well, at least I would advise you that because enterprise architecture has the highest score, it's not very wise to start your governance initiative building something around enterprise architecture. You must have first a solid base, and then you can further consider what the outcome is here. That's why we put some examples together of how your governance initiative should look like. So first is ensuring that the most essential operational processes are developed, and then you see that we consider operations problems and service requests and incidents, but also already in a first initiative, in the first program, start working on performance and conformance, because The performance and conformance is something that will measure how well these processes you developed are performing and how conform they are with the rules, with principles, with policies you have in your organization. A second set could be about building and implementing processes. Um, it's about building and implementing solutions which start with solution identification. Then you have IT changes and the IT change acceptance and transitioning. And with the IT changes, there is a link to human resources because every change can have an impact on the people working in your organization. These examples are developed to give you an idea of how you can build your own governance program. So maybe we can have a short, well, not a break here, but um, are there already any questions so far?
So far, I haven't seen any questions on the chat, but I do have a question myself. If you
Okay.
so, uh, uh, learning from these examples and based on the conclusion from the previous, let's say, rating, if I call it like that, uh, is it something that actually we can mix and match where to start, or is always kind of like recommended to start like this structure?
No, no. Imagine that you have, if you have already a good solid base for operational processes, then you don't have to focus on those in a governance initiative.
Ah, okay,
But
clear.
this is important if it is not your operational processes are not very solid or effective, then I think you should first focus on those and then go on a higher level. A higher level, I mean, in the DSS, this is mainly DSS, so deliver service and support domain. And then you have the well, it's more steering domains like APO and BAI, um, where you have to and this goes more and more to the governance of and the alignment with the business. And that's why the DSS processes for me are basic, and specifically those three. um, and this is also what we did with the predefined list of priorities to give you an idea of the importance. But yes, it is in general, it could be this. And for the second example here, that depends, of course, if in your organization there is a lot of development, or you don't have a lot of IT related development, and then it could be more important to focus on I can imagine that you can also focus on managing projects or managing the budget of your IT department, IT resources. So it all depends also on the pain points in your organization. And that's why if I go back here, to get this outcome is with an imaginary case that we fill this in with a certain SME in mind, but not all every SME is the same. Of course, it depends on what kind of business you are in, and that's why in that Appendix C of the guide we explain the context of that SME. So it is a very innovative organization. That's why innovation is scored very high, which develops is in the innovative development business. So that's also why architecture is important. But if you are not in that kind of business, you will not have this kind of score. So certainly these conclusions of this exercise is not a, an average for SMEs. This is certainly not the case. So maybe I go back 2 slides to or explain, because I forgot to show you this. Sorry that I answer with your question with a very long answer. But I forgot to show you this design toolkit, and this is important if you have never seen it to give you an idea of what it is about. So the first one here is the what kind of enterprise strategy archetype your organization is, and then you see here is growth and acquisition important, or innovation differentiation, cost leadership, or client service tape and stability. So you fill in here the importance from 1 to 5, and based on this score, you get here, yeah, it's just a graph that's not so very exciting. But what is exciting is that it is mapped to the 40 objectives, and then you see how it which objective gets out as the most important with your score of the strategy or the kind of strategy archetype of your organization.
Clear. Thank you very much. By the way, we have Peter Knappen raising his hand. Peter?
Okay.
Yes, thanks, Kate. My question is about the two examples you showed. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's in your main presentation, 2 pages further.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay,
in
I
the
go back.
first example,
Mm-hmm. This here.
yes, this one
Mm-hmm.
is for essential operational processes, and then the goal is performance and conformance. And
Mm-hmm.
my question is, what do you mean with conformance? Would it be something like fulfill requirements, or should I read conformance more like compliance?
It's the first thing. Conformance is fulfilling requirements, your own policy requirements, strategy requirements, because this is referring to uh, an objective of COBIT, and the compliance part is another objective. I go back. You see, yes, it's you have MEA. I'm always troubles with pronouncing this. 2 and 3 are more focusing on compliance. So this is conformance with your own internal requirements, or requirements you have defined for each of the processes or the
Okay.
objectives.
Very clear answer. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Another question?
I think we can continue with your presentation.
Okay, yes. Um, yes, so I briefly showed the toolkit. So it goes on for those other aspects, and it's really very easy to use and to give you an idea. So I would really recommend to use it when you start a governance initiative. Now we come to the next part of the, well, presentation. Let's say it's about the differences, the really the content of governance and management objectives. As most of you might know, it is a lot of knowledge that has put together in that guide of governance and management objectives, also of the core business, of the core guide, and of this SME guide. And what I would like to highlight are the differences. Of course, I cannot do that for the 40 objectives, because then we need 2 days or more. So that's not the objective, or it's not possible. So I will highlight it for one objective. I choose to show you the differences. The first thing is that for each governance and management objective, you have a kind of a description and a purpose statement. And what we add is a focus area relevance statement, which provides some more information about the relevance of that specific objective, specifically for SMEs, of course. So it will highlight some items that are important regarding each objective. If you look at, I choose APO 10 vendor, managed vendors as an example, and I will use that for all the components I will show you. So the description and the purpose is how it has been defined in the core guide, and then there is a relevance statement. And I highlight here some statements like vendor and or supplier management, because personally I don't like the term vendor management, but that's just me. And but also at Isaka they will probably change it again to suppliers, because vendors for me it's like they sell something and that's it, and a supplier is more like you have a partnership with your supplier who provides also services and so on. And in the context of COBIT, it's more that kind of supplier that we are talking about. Well, this is just a side remark. So it needs to be formalized, because in a lot of small organizations and medium-sized, they have important contracts with suppliers, but the management is not formalized, which can lead to very difficult or bad situations. So that's one thing. It needs to be formalized. How 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 uh, how you do it? It must be very lean and not administratively heavy, but there should be some formalization in your management of suppliers, and especially focusing on critical services if they are all outsourced. Also, the evaluation of pricing and performance is essential, not only at the start, but also in well, during the execution of such a contract. And then the last part is about that potential vendors, they can be identified when there is a need for a new supplier, and periodically for ongoing evaluation, because, and this is different from the core publication, there they state that you should continuously uh, evaluate the whole market of potential vendors. And I think that that an SME will not do it. They will do it at the moment there is a need, and not continuously, because that's a too heavy process for an SME. Then the components. So this is the starting point of each objectives, which gives a description and a purpose statement, and so also the relevance statement. If we have a look at the 7 components more in detail, we start with the processes. We have chosen, decided to keep the same set of 40 processes. Oh, I see I have a typo here in my slide. Okay. Um, so why did we do that? You can argue that it would have been easier if we had reduced the 40 processes to 25 processes. For instance, eliminating what my idea was when I started this assignment for Azaka. I thought we should reduce it and, for instance, eliminate portfolio management, uh, not having program and project management, but only having project management. Um, this kind of quality and IT, your IT management system, to combine that into one objectives. So you can consider combining lots of these 40 objectives, but then we are prescribing what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And it could be that imagine you are running an organization which is specialized in doing programs for other organizations. You are an SME, then your portfolio program project management is hyper important. So if you would have left it out, you will not have access to the content, the knowledge of those 40 processes or 40 objectives. So we choose to keep the same set, but in the relevance statement, you will see that we make some comments on what is more or less important for an SME. What we did do is to reduce the number of activities for each practice. So we have a process, then a practice, and then activities. And also the metrics, we reduced that a lot. and not only reducing the number of metrics, but also making them more pragmatic. Those of you, and well, a lot of you know COBIT, you might have noticed that reading or trying to apply or to implement the metrics as defined by COBIT is not always easy or not practical. So we try to make it more practical. So here you see the example for managed vendors. The first practice, identifying and evaluating vendor relationships and contracts. Um, this statement has always, we kept that the same, but the metrics, the related metrics to this practice has been changed. I just put, just to give you an idea, what is in the core guide. You see percent of defined evaluation criteria achieved for existing suppliers and contracts, and the percentage of alternative suppliers and so on. So we changed it to the percent of positive evaluations of existing vendors and contracts, and the percent of vendors or contracts changed due to a negative evaluation. As always, you have to make your own metric or define your own metric for the performance evaluation, but this we think this is a little bit more practical than what is over here for an SME. So this is for the metrics. Then for the activities, sometimes it changed a lot for some objectives or practices, and sometimes just a little. What we did here is we reduced the continuous scan of the enterprise landscape, as already said, mentioned in the um, relevance statement. We don't think that is needed for an SME, but the other activities we kept here, and also capability level. I go back. The capability level, sometimes we lifted it up a little bit, so then means that if in the core guide it's capability level 3, we think that for an SME you are already at a capability level 4. But in the majority, we try to keep the same capability levels. Then we come to the second component, organizational structures. As I already said, it's about committees, functions, and roles in your organization. And for each of those practices in a process or an objective, the responsibility and accountability is suggested. It is a suggestion. It's very important. Which organizational structures did we define? We changed it a lot, this one, because the list of organizational structures in the core guide is too large and too heavy, and those functions or committees typically don't exist in a small or medium enterprise. We also try to make the names a little bit more um, to the ground. It's a general manager, financial manager, instead of the chief executive officer or the chief financial officer, and so on. So we called it manager. But having said that, the first thing you have to do while applying COBIT is to have a look at these organizational structures and translate them to your organization and say, okay, our general manager, how do we name it? It's the algemene directeur, the director general, or so you name it the name of your in your organization. You do that once because the list of organizational structures is the same throughout the 40 objectives. I show you also the second list so that you know, okay, you can have a look at what kind of organizational structures we defined. And it's important to translate these to your organization. And if you have it done once, it's valid for all the objectives you will consider in your governance program. What is defined in COBIT for each objective is a list. So here you see again the the practices of vendor management, and you see for the 5 practices who is accountable and who is responsible. Responsible means that they have a responsibility in all or part of this practice. Here you see that we put the accountability with the head of IT, and if I show you this is from the core publication, you see that the accountability is with the INT governance board. But we decided not to keep an INT governance board because it will not exist in a small and medium enterprise. And that's why we lay the responsibility to the head of IT or the IT manager or whatever it is called, the highest function in your organization responsible for IT. Why did we do that? Because it's still about information and technology, and we think that the head of IT has an accountability over that. Now, if having said that, but if in your organization it's you have a purchase department who also considers the purchase of IT suppliers or manage that is accountable for that, then you put the accountability at the manager of that purchase department. So it's important to know that this is a suggestion, a starting point. It's not a Bible, it's not something you have to do. You have to consider always the context of your organization to make your own Raki. But the Raki is important to clarify the responsibilities and accountabilities. You also notice here that there are much more functions involved in the core guide than in the SME guide. We reduced the number of functions. Well, a lot. Well, yes, we did. So that about organizational structures, principles, policies, and procedures. It always also has been adapted to the SME context because some of the policies you never, well, I think you never will find them in an SME. So we try to keep at least one policy for every objective. And to make it also again a little bit more pragmatic than in the core, compared to the core publication. Here you see, for instance, that a relevant policy is that there should be a third-party service delivery management policy with a description, but an IT procurement policy, we thought it is not that relevant. It's better to have a service delivery management policy, and that the procurement policy is not really, in addition to this one, is less important. So we left it out in this SME guide. I show you this just as an example and to show how we developed the SME guide, not that you have to go to compare all the time both publications. That's not the purpose. The purpose is that you use the SME guide as your main guide if you choose to follow this one. Then the information flows. Information flows is about inputs, outputs that each practice, the outputs that they provide or the inputs that are used in each practice. And also that has been adapted to the SME context. Again, I repeat it because it was always same kind of reasoning to make it more pragmatic. So here you see how it looks like. You have the 5 practices which uses input from different sources and what is used here. And then also here you see that for manage vendor relationship and contracts, we say that there is no specific input for this practice. In the core, you see that there is an approved acquisition plan, and like an approved acquisition plan might be too far or too high level, too, I don't know. In Dutch, I would say te hoog gegrepen. I don't know exactly how to say it. It's a little bit. It goes a little bit too far for a small or medium organization. So this is why we said there is you are going to manage the relationships and contracts, but there is no real input for that. Next, culture, ethics, and behavior. again, it's adapted. The descriptions in COBIT in general are not so well developed or very specific as they are, for instance, for organizational structures. But it's good to have a look at it just to think about what could be important related to that objective. And I have put here the example for the vendor management, that you have to build up an ecosystem. So it is about what you could consider as a key culture element. And then additional guidance is left out from the core publication.
Sorry, Fred, just a reminder, it's 5 more minutes to 8 o'clock.
Oh, I'm talking too much. Oh, la 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 la. La. Okay. I have to speed up. So, people skills and competencies is the same. So I don't go further. And then the service infrastructure and applications is also well, a little bit adapted. And you have some things here. Because why I say this, I want to show you a little bit those two other, the suitability test, the simple tools to help you. Design toolkit I already explained to you, and then the goals cascade exists already from the COBIT 5, and it's a very practical um, um, tool. I think in easy, not so complex as the design toolkit. The suitability test consists of a few statements which you see here, and it's the purpose that you say, okay, for the simple command structure, what statement is applicable for our organization, and by filling in all these statements you get here a graph on the spider chart. And we say staying in the blue zone means that you have to stay, if you fill it in, it gets a blue or a red or purple thing. And if you have too much purple, it's too far to the outside, it means. Then you should not be, you should not consider your organization as an SMB. Another thing is watch the heat. Again, a few statements which you have to agree with or not agree with, and then you see with the colors if you stay in the green or if it's red. And if it's red, well, obviously, then it's less. This SME guide will be less relevant or pertinent for your organization. Go a little bit further then. So the design toolkit I already showed you. The a simple toolkit or a simple thing to do is the goals cascade, which is mapping enterprise goals to alignment goals, and then you have a selection of governance and management objectives. It goes with 13, it starts with 13 enterprise goals from which you have to say which is most important in our organization. Based on that, an automatic mapping is done to alignment goals, which again, you have to evaluate if this is relevant or is this correct. And then it has a further, this is the mapping table. It means that the enterprise goals are mapped to alignment goals with a priority relation and a secondary relation. And then these alignment goals are mapped. And this is a standard table which is available, which was already available in COBIT 5, which has been updated to the new objectives of COBIT to 19. And based on this, you can have a selection of your own. You can make a prioritization of your objectives. We developed a goals cascade, a tooling for that, that is not just taking it into consideration, yes or no, but with a weighting factor so that you can play a little bit more with the importance of the outcome here, because you can imagine 40 processes, objectives, and then um, yeah, that you will come out with too many objectives to work with. So you must have a nuanced result while doing the goals cascade. If you're interested, I can show you some more, or I can send you some information on how we developed that one. The outcome is then, yes, the priority points here, and with those enterprise goals and alignment goals, oh, sorry, um, you get also again a set of suggested metrics on the level of enterprise goals and alignment goals, which you can use to develop, to define your metrics on the objective level. So I think I have to stop here because there was some no, practical example I had foreseen, um, but this is very generic. How you set up your governance system or governance program, taking into consideration those factors, making sure that you avoid threats and pitfalls. It's all in the guide, so you, or it is in the presentation, which will be available for you to consider if you're setting up your own program, and also that you prioritize. I've said that sufficiently, I think. And then the team should also be how you should develop your team with expertise, experience, but also an authority in the organization to make sure that the changes can be implemented and can be made sustainable in your organization. And then you have what you should do for each, well, the steps you do for each objective you are working on. It is the baseline definition, then defining what should be your target capability level using the content of those objectives, and then making a plan to close the gaps, implement it, and then make sure that you can operate it at the desired capability level. So make it sustainable in your organization. Sorry that I have to go so quick now, but that because this is really how you are going to implement it, how you're going to use the material that is in the part of governance and management objectives. Just the last point I want to mention is the capability levels. It's also kind of a growing path you should introduce in your organization. Now I have to stop. I stop.
All right, thank you very much. By the way, one last question. To what extent do you consider ISO 31000 can be integrated into COBIT 2019?
For me, it's another. Well, it's certainly another level of detail. It is more aligned than it was before, um, but it's kind of a high level in my perception. It's a high level good practice to follow, um, but it doesn't contain all the knowledge that is available in COBIT. So I would I'm always using COBIT, and I checked the ISO standard, but I don't think it's so practical in getting used to it or getting using it to set up your governance program.
All right, clear. So I guess if
So,
there's
uh,
any question,
can I respond to that? Because
Yes.
I asked a question. I'm Robert Korsloot, but that's not what I mentioned. I maybe the risk management principles, as stated in ISO 31000, can improve the risk management function that we use, that we attach to our governance assessments, and by that
Yes, that's
improving our insights into the risks that we run when we operate governance.
yes. That is correct. Sorry, I was mistaken. I was referring to another ISO standard. My apologies. No, of course, it's a risk. No, and that's also why COBIT is referring to other standards to guide you to another standard, that another framework that has more details on that kind of topic. And you're right with your comments, so I was mistaken. So but for like also it's referring to ISO 27000 for the security objectives, security related objectives, and it's referring to others. So that's why COBIT integrates or refers to others in case of for more details on a specific topic. So you are right on what you say. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I meant. Thanks.
yeah, yeah.
All right, clear then. Thank you very much, everybody, for staying in. I guess we continue in the next webinar. We would like to thank our speaker for today. Gert, thank you very much for your presentations, and for the rest of us, have a nice evening. See you again next week. We have a great presentation from a speaker from TNO. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening, everybody. Bye now.